think it will pick up my voice. Okay, we'll try it. All right, so you guys, I just want to go through some of the process that designers go through. So, no one should be on their computer right now. Matt, can you just close your computer? But what we're gonna do is we're gonna be drawing some sketches as we look at examples. So I just want to talk about the design process really quickly. So as a graphic designer, you would meet with a client and they would say, okay, I need you to come up with like a logo for my company. And then you'd sit with them and talk about, okay, what is their company? You find out as much about their company as you can. And then like, what are their aesthetics? Like, are they modern? Are they contemporary? Are they more traditional? And you like kind of brainstorm together. Okay, and then as a designer, what you do is on your own, you go and you just dump your ideas onto a page. So like this can be very messy, but we call these thumbnail sketches. So say I'm a photographer, and this is like a great example for photography logos. You know, like how can I, as a designer, out of very basic shapes, come up with a nice, bold, clean, simple logo for this person? Okay, so this is just me dumping down a bunch of ideas. Now this is just a logo, so I'm playing with positive and negative space in the first example here. And I'm just kind of, you can see the evolution from one to the other, like just moving things around a little, changing it little by little. But you just want to get your ideas onto the page. So now those are thumbnail sketches of logos. The one on the right here, this was for a promotional poster. So when you're doing thumbnail sketches, they're quick and you want to get your idea down. So this one relies heavily on composition. Okay, so this is called, I don't know, they're all different. These ones are, they have different titles and stuff, but you can see from afar, even from where you're sitting, kind of how they'd be laid out. Do you see like, you can see like there's a pencil here, and this says sketch, I think it says sketch on or sketch lesson or something like that. There's a pencil, and then you can see where the title goes. And then there's these little lines underneath that imply there's a little more text there, but we're not gonna like write in all the text. But we're laying out, where does our imagery go? Where do the main title, where's that gonna go? And then some of the extra additional text, where is that gonna go? So sometimes just playing with, I'm gonna trip on that fan. Sometimes just playing with the layout. We wanna see it from afar. So you're not necessarily like doing anything, like these are very nice. These thumbnail sketches of the John Cage one. They don't have to be that neat. Mine often look messy like the ones on the right. But so basically, you're playing with size, proportion, and layouts. Where are you placing things? So generally for a play poster, a concert poster, something like that, you need like the title of the play or the title of the book, the title of the concert or the band would be front and center, right? And that falls into, we talked about this with typography, you want certain words to stand out. There's more important information that you need to convey before other information. Like the title of the play is going to be front and center, and then you might have like the director of the play, the writer of the play, and so on and so forth. So when you're doing thumbnail sketches, generally you just want to make kind of a box or a rectangle conveying like what position would your poster be in. And for a play poster, you guys, we're all going to be working vertical, like a, you know, taller and like than wide. So like vertical layout like these. In general, most posters are. But can you see for this John Cage, how it would kind of look? You get a visual, they just quickly draw in some elements. Anywhere you see just lines, that's where additional like information would be included. But you can really quickly see a layout. If you have a photo you're going to use, a lot of times we'll just do a box with an X in it to convey like that's where the photo will be. And then like, you know, the title you might draw like write out in a special font. You might draw in some of the main features. Like this one says, look at, there's a microphone, a very messy microphone. We know you're going to draw that better in the final one, but look at, what if you place it here with the title here? What if you place it at an angle with the title there? What if it's bigger? What if it's smaller? Oh, I try a mouth with it up there. So do you guys see how you can really quickly sing out? There's title, there's like little subtitles and stuff, information along the side. Oh, it's 1/3 down the page, and then the information's below it. There's a lot of negative space in this one. This one's cropped. There's a mouth with a microphone. The word sing out down here. There's two people singing, competing with the word sing out in the middle. But can you guys just see how it's quickly laying down the information? Okay, so thumbnail sketches, they're very quick. They're like an idea dump. Okay, so it's really important that you're just gonna get your ideas down. You don't have to be creating amazing sketches for all of them. You know, you want to get as many ideas as possible down on the page, and then later you can kind of refine each one. So as a designer, you start out with quickly dumping your ideas on the page. Lots and lots of sketches, okay? With posters, lots and lots of layouts. Then the next step in the process is you are going to pick your top designs, your top sketches, and you're going to redraw them bigger, neater, and nicer. And those are what we call roughs. So you start with thumbnail sketches. Okay, so this was for this project. These were the person's thumbnail sketches. And then they picked their top 3 and redrew them nice and neat. And look at, they even try, like, it's good if you even use like a ruler, maybe a circle template, make it really neat. And those are what are called roughs, and they trace it with black. So we're gonna start in black and white, like always, with graphic design, because it's cheaper to print black and white, and then we'll add in a color scheme later. But so you guys, the roughs are what you'll show to a client. So you're not gonna like show a client a whole page of thumbnail sketches. Those are for you just to brainstorm. But you're gonna take your best ideas, redraw them nice and neat with black marker to present them to a client. So thumbnails, then you do the roughs, and then you meet with your client, and a lot of times they're gonna have things like, oh, I really like this, but can you change this? You know, I wanna do this. So like, this is like, we haven't spent a ton of time designing in the computer yet. We wait until we meet with them, we show them our ideas, and then they're like, oh, I really like this one up in the right corner. And then you go into the computer and you redraw it. So this is the final comp. So the final comprehensive design is what you then create for your client that they pay for, that you give them. So this is the design process. If you work in like a graphic design firm or something, you would kind of go through this process, and a lot of times there's critiques and meetings along the way with your other coworkers or with the clients. But there's a lot to get through these steps. So these are the basic steps, and it's good to kind of start broad and kind of narrow things down and tweak things. But with this, can you imagine like drawing that on the right? We're just using lines and shapes. You know how to use the pen tool. You know how to use shape tools. That's going to be pretty easy to create it or to draw it in the computer. You know, these are going to be really simple. It's the brainstorming and coming up with ideas that takes a little bit of time. Notice the final comp on this. There's thin lines, there's thick lines, there's overlapping lines, there's rectangles, it's all straight. There's vertical lines, which show like the one on the right really kind of anchors it. So like, how do you come up with those ideas? So for this, you guys are going to come up with, I have a whole a worksheet that has the thumbnail sketches already like printed for you, like the rectangles, so it makes it nice and neat. But we're going to kind of look through some examples and get some ideas here to come up with our final poster design. So in the end for this, you guys, this is what we're going to be creating. So you're not like, what are we doing here? You are going to be creating a design using shape and line only in black and white. And then what we'll do is in the computer, we'll create that, and then we'll save it, and then we'll save as, and we'll infuse a color scheme. And then save as again and recolor it and use a second color scheme. That way you have several options to show your client. And then you're going to take one of those versions, any of them, and add one of the words from our notes from today. One of the fundamentals of design or some of our compositional rules that you think apply best to your design. So you do want to leave some negative space, and you want to find a space in your design where you think the text would fit in there. So generally, if you know you're going to include text, you kind of include those in your thumbnail sketches, like where will the word go? Just one word we're going to include. I kind of picture this as I'm an art teacher, and I'm looking for posters for my art classroom to hang on the wall. You know, like you see like the elements and principles. Like this would be kind of a cool thing, to sell to art teachers or something like that. So if that's our project, like you're going to be creating art posters like that will go on the wall in an art classroom. That is our goal here. Okay, but in the end, you know how quick it is now to do variations. You're going to do several variations. You're going to choose a font that you think matches the style of the drawing, and we're going to create 4 variations of one of our best designs. Okay, so that's just the art, that's the design process. I just wanted to go through it really quickly. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take some notes, but really simply just by looking at some examples. I want to show you how like I gather ideas, because as artists, I feel like we're always getting ideas and inspiration. We kind of need to from the things around us. It's really hard to just like come up with something out of thin air. So we do as much research as we can on a subject, and then we just gather ideas from the world around us. So to start here, let me just make this big. I wonder if it'll let me draw on it. I get really bogged down by this board. I don't know, like sometimes it lets me draw and sometimes it doesn't. Oh, it did. Okay. So I am gonna draw on this. So for this is just the front slide I made for this composition lesson. So you guys are gonna draw some thumbnail sketches today, and I'm gonna just pop up some different compositional rules, and you're gonna write down the rule and draw like a little, composition that demonstrates the rule. So this one, create a strong focal point for composition. So on your notes, if you can write composition and write create a strong focal point. What does that mean? Any ideas there?
Focal point.
What's a focal point? Focus, Matt? Focus, like something. Yeah, you like zoom into, you focus in on. Good. So something that grabs your attention. So on this one, what is the focal point? The car, right? And it does some cool things like this line goes from thin to thick, and it surrounds, it kind of frames, we call that framing. It frames the car. And that creates like a focal point. We use like the balance of the page, the positive and negative space to kind of frame the car. So when we're doing the shape and line posters today, what I want you to do, you're only going to be using shapes and lines today to draw from this. Do you need to grab something from the printer? Yeah. How's it going? Okay. So let's draw the rectangle here. We're using this as inspiration. You guys just kind of follow on. How could you use this poster as inspiration? Not copying it, but kind of copying the layout. Kind of. I just will look at things and be like, I really like the way this divides up the page. So it kind of comes like a quarter of the way in. Doesn't go all the way to the end. See ya. You think you too. And it kind of does something like this. I made straight lines. So if you were looking at this poster, how could you use it as inspiration? Maybe I do a circle instead of a car. We're just using shapes in lines here. So I divided up the space the same way. This is my composition poster. Now I could take it and I can make this line go thinner to thicker, right? To thin again. It's hard for me to draw on this thing. But how could you make your own focal point using the same layout? I want to teach you to copy designs and layouts, but you're really not no one will recognize them because you're going to use different elements. So if I have the car here in the row, this is kind of if this were my shape and line poster, I'm stealing the design from this, but I'm making it completely my own, right? I'm just making it, I'm filling it in with my own shapes, but I'm using the space in a similar way. So I think that's key. How do you use the space in a similar way to this to create a focal point? So this is my focal point because it's framed and surrounded by elements that are kind of leading your eye there. So strong focal point is where your eye goes right to. So this is about the car. I want to I put the line kind of leads down to the car. So what you guys are going to do is on your page, write composition, create a strong focal point. And then try to draw a version of this using just lines and shapes. Because what you guys can do is when we're going through this, you're going to find some variations you really like, and then you can use them as your final design if you want. So basically, this is what I do for every project. I just start to look at examples of things that already exist, and I steal ideas. Not really, because everything's copyrighted, so I am inspired by ideas, and I just make them my own. Would you ever know this design was from that? No. No one's ever gonna recognize that, but I'm looking at the way the space is used. So on your page, you should have the fundamentals of design, those listed, and now you have composition, and now we're just gonna write down some terms and draw some little examples. So create a strong focal point. Emphasis is a word for that when you're emphasizing something. So you could definitely emphasize something. You could, we're going to do a vertical page, but, you know, maybe having circles and then one triangle and circles. The triangle is different. If something is different than the other, it will be emphasized, right? Something's a different color, something's a different shape. Something is surrounded by something, it's going to be emphasized. So creating a strong focal point, you can just write emphasis with that. And you've already emphasized, if you've drawn something that's similar to like my little drawings, you're emphasizing the shape because it's like surrounding it. On this little drawing too, you can write the word framing because putting elements around your, let me see, I think I have framing on here. Putting elements around your focal point is called framing. We do that in photography a lot. No, I think I took it off this, but that is something I use a lot. I didn't want to give you like a million rules. We just have a couple, but there are lots more. So framing, there's all these umbrellas surrounding this one umbrella. That's kind of framing it. Okay, let's try another one, another sketch for this one. So we had emphasis and focal point kind of go together. Proximity or isolation. So isolating your focal point. So all of these squares on the right are all together, and then this makes this the focal point. Those trickling down, broken apart squares become the focal point because they're separate from the rest. Same with this guy. These are all together. This guy, your eye goes right to him because he is not close to the rest of the stuff. So that could be with typography, you guys. If you have a lot more space around the text, your eye's going to go there first. If it's different than the rest, you're emphasizing that because there's space around it. Okay, so proximity. So your little sketch for proximity could look something like, you know, you could have like a bunch of lines or something, and then you have like something up here. If you have the same things over and over, and then you have something separate, it is going to stand out, right? So what you're going to write is proximity and isolation. And let's draw an example of that using some lines or shapes. So like maybe I have a bunch of lines here, and then I have one here. You know, it's far away from the other, so your eye's going to go to this line. And then you can take it a step further. Maybe that is lines of text, you know. It's not even like an actual line. You have like words there. You have other words here. Your eye's going to go to this word first. Oh. So this works a lot, you guys, with wording, like I said, with typography. So look at my example here. Look at this nicely grouped together bits of text, like with the title, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Cinderella. Your eye kind of goes there because it's got a little icon right above it. It's all like grouped together and clumped together. And then it has this really loose text up here. So your eye goes here, but then I feel like it really like gets caught up on this information. Glass slippers are so bad. And like that's floating, it's away from everything else. So it's like puts emphasis on that area. So it's okay to like have some negative space and have your eye kind of go to that negative space. So if I'm redrawing this, maybe I do like a kind of like everything's here. And then maybe you have like, I don't know, there's like a little kind of there as well. I'm just trying to like redraw the layout a little bit. I'm not focusing on, you know, the content, just the use of space. So do you guys all draw something that represents proximity or isolation? So you guys are writing this down, right? Okay, so you then just draw an example of each. Proximity and isolation, draw an example of that. So these are just examples I found. So you got the Cinderella shoe, some of these. Like, how could you draw that? It's kind of using the lower right corner, and it balances it with like this upper area. There's a nice wide margin around everything. So like for a Shrek poster, You could be like, oh, I like the layout of this. Maybe I could have like it nice and condensed right here in the middle, kind of lower portion of the page. I could have like Disney Shrek, and then the information there, and all the info at the bottom. Because there is sometimes a lot of info. And then maybe I could do like, I'm a believer or something up here. Like have all that negative space. And then maybe I could have like just part of the character's head popping up, or I don't know what the Shrek, maybe a couple weeds from the swamp there. Like, so like you can use the same layout. So that's what I want to focus on, is just looking at where things are placed, how they're grouped together. So everything we've learned so far is coming together now. Look at the text arrangements. Everything's like using a nice structured underline grid. Things are like pieced and puzzle pieced together, organized, and then like, you know, you're kind of like with the typographical logos and icons we made, like how, you know, do those fit into the text as well. Everything kind of comes together now. Okay, so contrast and variety. So contrast and variety, you know, variety, just having like variety of shapes or variety of lines. This is color, obviously opposite colors on the left side. But this one, like having thin lines, having like different size circles. If you have thin lines and thick lines and diagonal lines and straight up and down lines, like just vertical lines and horizontal lines. This one's got variety in like the colors choices too on the right. And then look at the size of the font too. Like the font, I think, is maybe the main focus here, having the bigger font with the smaller font. So if I were like redrawing this, you know, I could do something. I'm just looking at the layout. I do love how these lines come in from the top and the bottom. These ones right here. And I love how there's this like negative space here. And I like how the shape is kind of cropped off. So maybe instead of the girl there, I could do like, I feel like my page is cut short. Maybe it's just like a long rectangle or shoot. Oh no, there's this line here. So look at, I can easily look at something like this. And then there's fashion this here. Maybe I have a couple, like instead of fashion, I have like a rectangle in the place of that. Very messily, like eh. And then like you can fill in some things. We're doing black and white first, like to add contrast, you guys. Adding like things, like coloring things in, rather than just leaving them outlines, is going to add a lot of contrast. It's really hard to draw on this board, but you can kind of see from afar like how, okay, I'm using this poster to come up with a layout. I'm kind of using some of the elements of this and just changing them to simple shapes and lines to create an interesting layout that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. Contrast and variety. So you can do that with color. You can do that with different weights of lines, a dotted line, a thin line, a thick line, a curved line versus a zigzag line. That's going to have variety of like lines, variety of shapes, having rectangles with circles, variety of shape sizes. We have just a couple more, you guys. They talked about rule of thirds in the video, but will you please write rule of thirds and just draw this little grid? So you divide up the page into 3 parts. So you just like put 2 lines through the middle. So it goes like you divide it into the thirds, both vertically and horizontally. So with rule of thirds, you guys, you don't want to put things in the middle of your page all the time. It gets boring. So like if I'm always putting like, okay, here's my triangle. That's my composition. No, it's boring. So instead, you would take a simple triangle and have it go 2/3 of the way off the page. If it fills up 2/3 of the page, that's more interesting. If I instead put this triangle here, that's more interesting. These little intersecting points are kind of natural areas of where our eye likes to go to. It creates tension in the image. So by placing this grid in photography, we use it a lot. In broadcasting, they talk a lot about rule of thirds. Like the Matrix was all shot with like rule of thirds. It means like they crop the top of the head and they put the eyes on the 1/3 line. When you do a composition, generally having the horizon line not right in the middle of the page, but down on one of the 1/3 lines or at the top of one of the 1/3 lines, it just adds a little more creativity, a little more balance, a little more emphasis. So if you have more of the sky showing, you know the picture is emphasizing the sky. And it's not emphasizing the water. It's more of the sky is showing. It just kind of guides your viewer. It creates tension. It makes things more interesting. So guys, stay with me here. We're almost done. This is without rule of thirds, a very simple drawing. Is this photo about the sky or the water? What's emphasized here? Nothing, right? It's the same. Well, that's bad. We want to create emphasis or focal point. So watch this. Transforms from this to that. Oh, it's so much better. So now this is emphasizing the sky. There's more of the sky showing. So just by shifting the water line or the horizon line down to the 1/3 line, and then also moving the sun over to where these 2 points intersect, it just adds more tension to the image. It's not so predictable. But I like to use rule of thirds a lot by like zooming in and like cropping. Maybe I have the sun coming 2/3 the way into the picture and cropping it that way. So here's just a couple ways that rule of thirds in graphic design. Well, here's photography. So see, I zoomed into the plate of food. Not like really small and in the middle. Or the people are on the 1/3 line. It just adds a little more interest. Sometimes things look good in the middle. If they're very symmetrical, they might look good in the middle. Here's though, I thought this was really cool. This is using rule of thirds, this design here. So this might be one that you want to use for your little sketch. I just love that the focal point is in the lower corner. So if I were to put like a rule of thirds grid on this, I'd go like this. And look, right where this intersects, it's like that 2 is lying, and there's overlapping here, which is always adds interest. So like, and there's lines leading to it. So you can picture the rule of thirds grid. Let me erase it now. And then look at, I could, in its place, maybe it's like, oh, I have a triangle and a circle. And then look at the lines that lead, but it's off to the side. And then look at, there's a little bit of negative space and kind of an isolated object there. I'm just adding like a shape where this text is. But that could be my design right there based off of this. So you don't have to center everything. Sometimes it's more interesting not to. Got like 2 more here. Balance. So that directly relates to balance because it's kind of an asymmetrical balance when you're using rule of thirds. So asymmetrical means it's still like equally weighted. So look at the moon, you guys, in this Vincent van Gogh Starry Night painting. It balances the little tree, the cypress tree on the left. I think it's a cypress tree. So there's balance, but it's not even. But they're like opposite parts of the page. So it adds balance. Same with this magazine layout. They're like a little slice up here. It's a very odd layout, but it's interesting because it's got this little piece up here that balances this piece. It's also quite nicely using rule of thirds. Like it's filling up 2/3 of the page. This one's got that right on the 1/3 line. Close to it. So balance, you have asymmetrical. So on your page, if you could write balance and then asymmetrical, and just draw a little example of asymmetrical balance. So if you're copying this one, it could literally be like not as asymmetrical balance, right? I mean, of course, it'd be kind of cool to do like some other cool lines going through it or something. Or maybe this one, it's kind of like a rectangle here, balancing a larger rectangle here. That's asymmetrical. It's still balanced, evenly weighted, but it is like not the same on both sides. Versus balance that is symmetrical. So look at these cool designs. A lot of times with poster design, you guys, like very minimal, full, it's very much like it's very balanced. Everything's even on both sides, but these are very like easy to see. It catches your eye. There's not a ton going on because there is oftentimes a lot of text you have to include. So see how it's the same on both sides. So if I was redrawing this, so balanced, symmetrical, if you folded the page in half, it'd be pretty similar. So the Adele one, she's not exactly similar on both sides of her figure, but like you could kind of draw something similar. Like a poster design, just something like that. Maybe you put a rectangle at the top. Maybe for this black swan one, it could be like, it's gotta be a little one, a circle with like maybe diagonals just coming through it, you know? Maybe it's not drawing out that stuff, but how would you make it interesting with just shapes? We're just looking at shapes and lines. So shapes or lines. So like just trying to redraw some of the layouts. Maybe it is a circle and it comes in. One of the lines is dotted. One is not. I'm copying the way it uses the space, but putting in simpler elements in their place. And then there's radial balance too, which you don't have to, it's very symmetrical as well, but like mandalas and stuff, they're the same like all the way around like a circular point. You don't have to draw that. But those are very centered generally. So those do not use rule of thirds. So that's an example of generally, if something's very symmetrical, it tends to be right in the center. But that's not to say you couldn't like enlarge that and have it coming 2/3 into the page or something too. Okay, I think there's two more things. Diagonal lines always energize things. It adds interest. So, you know, if you draw something with lines, let's say, as soon as you take it and like put it at an angle, even with text, it's going to be more interesting. It's going to have more energy, I should say. The diagonals add energy. They add movement. Your eye kind of follows them. So you can try one of the drawings you've already done. Like let's say that Adele poster drawing was kind of like that. As a variation, you could do something like, oh, maybe I have it coming from the corner instead. You know, like I'm just looking at these things and trying to find, I'm gonna copy this one. Let's see. There's that. Then it's got like a little diagonal this way. Maybe that's my design. So if it's looking a little blasé, rotate it 30 degrees, 45 degrees. Okay, I think this is the last one. Make sure you write it down. This is one I use constantly, overlapping. And then another principle of design is repetition. So these have a lot of overlapping, which shows depth, right? Look at these, how they overlap. I love these posters. So I mean, a lot of my students in the past have used these for inspiration for our line and shape posters because it is kind of cool. The lines change, they have variety and contrast by changing from solid to dashed or dotted. And then they have things going behind and in front of each other. So it almost looks like it's going behind the triangle. There's things overlapping. So it all kind of comes together. There's lines or dots in the layout of a triangle or rectangle, but they are not actually, like it's not a rectangle, it's just in the shape of a rectangle, like the way they're laid out. So they kind of give the implication of shapes. So overlapping though, it shows depth. And then having repetition, like repeating things, changing the size of things to have variety when you repeat them. This one has a fill on. This one has an outline on. Fill, outline. So you could take a couple shapes and then have some with the fill turned on, some with just an outline. Look at this, outline changes to dots. It goes from solid to dots. How are they cutting pieces away? It's almost like you have papers and you're cutting them and just like arranging them on the page. And negative space is totally fine. It's nice to have some blank space. That's often a good spot to put in text or things like that. So overlapping to show depth. So let's do an example, a little sketch of that. Here's some like graphic design examples. But we use it in all throughout our photography, paintings. This one, it almost looks like they just like cut this out and moved it and like inverted the color, like did opposite color. I think that's what they did. You got this rectangle kind of filling up 2/3 of the page. Then just cut a circle out of it and kind of overlap it. It's kind of cool with overlapping too. You can play with the transparency and opacity in Illustrator. So we're going to be back in Illustrator for these. And then in the video, they showed like using drop shadows and stuff can make a shape look like a form. This one's got some of those kind of gradients to make it look like it's popping out, and things are overlapping, so it looks like one is in front of the other. And then here's an example of diagonal lines with overlapping, and they have different thicknesses and thinnesses, stripes, showing different interests, just grabbing your attention. And then this one as well, lots of overlapping, different opacities, lots of diagonals. There's so many great things you can look at for inspiration. And it's like, you never want, you know, someone to be noticeably that you're like using their layout. But I mean, if you're using different elements and different drawings and just putting them in the same place, I mean, that's totally fine. You're changing it up the majority of the way. Okay, I lied. This is our last one. Positive and negative space. Do you have to grab something from the printer? Yeah, you can run through here. Okay, so this is like, it's very, very trendy right now, and it's kind of, I think, a 60s movement, but using like negative space. So these are posters for different things. And look at how this comes in 2/3 of the way, rule of thirds. And we use positive and negative space with our logos, with our monograms. You know, that's a whole part of being like gold graphic designs in graphic design. So look at how it comes 2/3 of the way in the page. This one's very centered, but he's very surrounded by the emptiness of the headphones. It's like a silhouette, and then the headphones are cut out of the head. So it's okay to have that like negative space and just kind of balance it. And you need to leave room for things to breathe, you know, like leave some of that extra space. But look at this, could have been centered right in the page, this ballerina one, but it's like more interesting. She's kind of flowing off the page. And then the text, look at how they use all left aligned text here, right justified text on the other side. So these are the kind of things you look at and you're like, hey, I could put a symbol here, like maybe for Shrek. And then I could have the title smaller here, and then maybe the author and stuff or the director off to the left. Like you're just using the way they use the space, you're copying that. You're using their layout. So sometimes less is more. These are just simple overlapping shapes. Playing with the opacity, it kind of gives the illusion of like a desert or something, right? Then they have some lines to divide the space and just like the grouping of the words. The space around the words is important to just kind of lead your eye around. So less is more. Okay, so what I would like you guys to do is hold on to these sheets for tomorrow. And then tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to redraw some of the ones you drew on your notes onto these little thumbnail sketch. And then you're going to come up with some, you're going to look at some different poster designs and things online, come up with your own, some more layouts, and then we're going to choose our top thumbnail sketches and turn them into roughs, where we redraw very neatly and nicely 3 of your best designs to present to a client. Thank you guys for your attention today. You did a great job. Hopefully it helps you when you're thinking of how to, you know, just get ideas for layout, because that's something we're always dealing with graphic design. You're pretty much coming up with